The galaxy was vast, stretching across the heavens with civilizations so ancient that their names were etched only in the forgotten dust of time. War and peace were as constant as the stars themselves, an unyielding cycle that had played out for eons. No species had ever truly risen above it all, until now. Humanity, a young and seemingly insignificant race, was about to change the balance of the galaxy forever. It began with a simple transmission, an encrypted signal, unintelligible to all but those who knew the language of the old empire. A starship, the Resolute, was tasked with investigating the mysterious source, its crew made up of Earth's finest and bravest. The captain, Sarah Vance, was a woman of unshakable resolve, one whose reputation for strategic brilliance had earned her the respect of even the most battle-hardened veterans of the Federation. Her crew was no less remarkable, a hand-picked team of scientists, engineers, soldiers, and diplomats. When the signal first appeared on their sensors, it had seemed like any other anomaly. But as the Resolute approached the source, it became clear that this was no ordinary phenomenon. A massive, abandoned structure, impossibly ancient and beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, drifted in the empty void of space. Its towering spires and jagged edges loomed like the skeleton of a dead god, a testament to a civilization long since past. The crew of the Resolute knew they had stumbled upon something monumental. Sarah Vance, though, remained cautious. The universe was a dangerous place, and humanity was still a fledgling power in the galactic theater. She ordered a cautious approach, wary of any potential threats. The vastness of the structure before them was overwhelming, its silent, eerie presence sending ripples of unease throughout the crew. As they docked and prepared to board the structure, Sarah called a briefing. "This place has been abandoned for millennia. Whoever, or whatever, built it is long gone. We don't know what we'll find inside, but we need to stay sharp." Dr. Elias Bradford, the ship's lead scientist, was eager but cautious. "The technology here, Captain, it's far beyond anything we've encountered. It's a treasure trove of knowledge, if we can unlock its secrets." The plan was simple: gather data, examine the structure, and return to Federation space with what they could learn. But as the crew entered the darkened halls of the ancient edifice, it became clear that this was no ordinary relic. Strange, alien symbols covered the walls, their meanings lost in time. Holographic projections flickered to life in response to the crew's movements, images of civilizations long since gone. And then, the alarms began to blare. It was not the structure itself that had begun to stir, but something far more menacing. Out of the darkness, a fleet of warships appeared, as though summoned by the very signal that had led the Resolute here. The ships were massive, built for annihilation, their forms unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The ships' designs were sleek, cold, and terrifying, reminiscent of predatory creatures stalking their prey. The crew was caught off guard. The Federation had never encountered such an advanced enemy. And yet, these ships did not attack immediately. Instead, a message pulsed through their communications channel, a voice speaking in a language too complex for their translators to handle. But one thing was unmistakable: this voice was not of a race that had ever known defeat. This was a being that had seen empires rise and fall, one whose people had witnessed countless civilizations bend to their will. "Humanity," the voice said, its tone dripping with disdain. "You are not worthy of this power. You will not be allowed to claim what is ours." Captain Vance stood before her crew, her jaw clenched. She had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This was not just a test of strength, it was a test of humanity's very survival. The crew looked to her for guidance, their eyes filled with uncertainty. But Vance was resolute. "Humanity has faced down impossible odds before," she said, her voice steady and filled with determination. "We don't bow to anyone, no matter how powerful they are. We fight for our future. We fight for our right to stand among the stars." The crew nodded, and a sense of unity filled the air. They would not give up. They would not surrender. As the first volley of fire from the enemy ships hit the Resolute, the battle for humanity's survival began. The Resolute returned fire, its weapons crackling with newfound fury. The warships of the alien fleet loomed large, but humanity was no longer the prey. The time for fear was over. The first encounter had begun. And humanity would stand strong. The Resolute shuddered under the force of the alien fire. Captain Sarah Vance gripped the edge of her command chair, her eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation with a calm, unwavering focus. The bridge crew scrambled, executing their orders with precision. This was no ordinary skirmish. The enemy ships were vastly superior, their weapons cutting through the Resolute's shields with frightening ease. "Shields are holding at 30%, Captain," reported Lieutenant Maria Jones, the ship's tactical officer. Her voice was calm, but there was a note of tension underneath. "They're relentless. We can't outrun them." "Divert all power to forward shields and weapons," Vance ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Prepare evasive maneuvers." "Lieutenant Bradford, can we get any intel from the structure?" Dr. Elias Bradford, the ship's lead scientist, was still stationed in the main laboratory, connected to the ship's sensors. His voice crackled through the comms. "I've got some data from the structure's systems. It's a map. It's showing the location of these ships' fleet, and more importantly, their weak points. They're heavily armored, but there are vulnerabilities. We might be able to exploit them if we can get close enough." "Noted," Vance said. "We're going to need every advantage we can get." The Resolute twisted through space, dodging another wave of alien fire, but it was clear that the ship's agility alone wasn't enough to hold off the enemy. The enemy fleet was relentless, its ships designed for combat on an overwhelming scale. But as the Resolute engaged them, a new feeling began to settle over Vance, one that she'd learned to trust in her years of commanding soldiers. This battle wasn't just about weapons or strategy. It was about something much deeper. It was about the unyielding resolve of her crew. And that, she knew, was something the aliens couldn't possibly understand. Vance's mind raced as she weighed their options. If they didn't get control of the situation soon, they would be reduced to scrap. The enemy's fire was too powerful, their ships too advanced. But the crew had something the aliens couldn't fathom, the will to survive. "Prepare for a counterattack," Vance commanded, her eyes locking with Lieutenant Jones. "We're going to take the fight to them. All fighters, launch immediately. I want those enemy ships in our sights, and I want them burning." In the fighter bay, the crew scrambled to launch their ships. The Federation's fighters were new, but they were highly advanced, outfitted with energy-based weapons and thrusters capable of high-speed maneuvers. As the fighters launched into the vacuum of space, the battle outside the Resolute intensified. The alien warships were formidable, their weapons capable of disintegrating entire ships in seconds. But there was one thing the enemy hadn't counted on: humanity's resourcefulness. The Federation's pilots were fiercely trained, not just in the mechanics of battle, but in improvisation, in thinking on their feet when things went wrong. They had faced desperate odds before, on Earth, and in the colonies, and they had always found a way to turn the tide. "Vance to Bradford, we need more intel. Can you pinpoint their weak spots?" Vance's voice rang out through the comms. Bradford's voice crackled back, but there was a hint of excitement in his tone. "I've accessed their shield's power grid. It's centralized in the heart of each warship. If you can get a direct shot at the core, we can disable their weapons and shields." Vance grinned, a rare moment of confidence breaking through the tension. "Then we'll make sure they regret coming after us." With the coordinates from Bradford, the Resolute moved in for the kill. Its massive turbolasers fired, targeting the alien ship's power cores, but the alien vessels weren't going down without a fight. Energy pulses filled the space between them, lighting up the void with flashes of destruction. Fighters danced around the larger ships, providing cover fire and engaging the alien ships in dogfights. Despite the overwhelming firepower coming from the alien warships, humanity's fighters held their ground, using their smaller size and speed to their advantage. As the Resolute closed in, Vance felt the surge of adrenaline coursing through her. She trusted her crew, their resolve, their determination to protect everything they had worked for. Then, in a bold maneuver, one of the Federation's fighters, piloted by Lieutenant Chris Adams, broke through the enemy's defensive line and locked onto one of the alien ship's core power conduits. His voice rang through the comms, cool and confident despite the peril. "Captain, I've got a clean shot. Firing now." The Resolute fired in sync with Adams, and the shot landed dead center in the alien ship's power core. The result was immediate. The alien ship erupted in a massive explosion, sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. The enemy fleet, momentarily stunned, hesitated. Vance seized the opportunity. "Now's our chance." Full assault on the remaining ships. With renewed vigor, the Resolute and its fleet of fighters pressed the attack. The enemy had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight with everything it had, even against insurmountable odds. Though the battle was far from over, a spark of hope ignited among the Federation crew. The resolve of the human spirit, the refusal to give in, was beginning to turn the tide. Humanity had been tested, and now, they would show the galaxy just what they were capable of. The first strike had been theirs. And it would not be the last. The Resolute glided through the wreckage of the alien fleet, the stars in front of them a stark contrast to the chaos left in the wake of the battle. The air on the bridge was thick with tension. Despite the victory, the crew knew that the fight had only just begun. The alien forces had retreated, temporarily, no doubt, but their superior technology and overwhelming numbers were a constant threat. Captain Sarah Vance stood before the viewports, her hands clasped behind her back as she surveyed the wreckage. The scars of the battle were evident on the Resolute's hull, but it was still functional, still capable of fighting. The alien warships, though, were another matter. Their ships were highly advanced, and while the Federation had managed to disable a few of their vessels, the majority were still intact. And now, the question on everyone's mind was clear: why? The transmission they had received earlier, the message spoken in a language no human had ever heard, still rang in Vance's mind. "Humanity, you are not worthy of this power. You will not be allowed to claim what is ours." Who were these aliens? What did they want with the ancient structure the Resolute had discovered? And why had they attacked with such fury? "Captain," Dr. Elias Bradford's voice interrupted her thoughts. The scientist had spent the past few hours combing through the data collected from the battle and the mysterious structure. He entered the bridge, his face illuminated by the dim glow of the holographic displays. "I've made a breakthrough. The structure, it's more than just a relic. It's a weapon. Or at least, it was designed to be one." Vance turned to face him. "A weapon?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "What kind of weapon?" Bradford hesitated, clearly torn between excitement and caution. "I think it's something capable of altering the fabric of space itself. The map we saw? It's not just a location grid. It's a network of ancient civilizations that were part of a vast empire. The aliens we're fighting, they're its remnants. They are the last of an ancient species who once ruled the galaxy, and they believe that this weapon is their birthright." Vance's mind raced. An ancient empire. A weapon capable of reshaping the galaxy. It was clear now, their mission was no longer just about surviving. They had become the guardians of a secret that could change everything. "We can't let them have it," she said, her voice steely with resolve. Bradford nodded. "I agree. But we need to figure out how to use this weapon against them, before they get to it first." Before Vance could respond, a new voice broke in through the comms. It was Lieutenant Maria Jones, the ship's tactical officer, her voice urgent. "Captain, we've got another fleet on the move. This time, it's much larger. We're talking hundreds of ships. It looks like they're massing for a full-scale assault on Federation space." Vance's heart sank. The aliens weren't just content with the structure, they were preparing to wipe out humanity before they could tap into its power. But this was no time for hesitation. "Set a course for the structure," Vance ordered. "We need to get there before they do. All hands on deck, prepare for another battle." The Resolute's engines roared to life as the ship turned away from the battlefield and towards the location of the ancient structure. The crew moved with purpose, each person knowing what was at stake. The stakes had grown exponentially. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about keeping humanity's future in its own hands. As the Resolute approached the structure once more, the magnitude of their mission became even more apparent. The vast edifice loomed ahead, its broken, jagged spires casting long shadows across the cold void of space. But now, as the Resolute closed in, something new appeared on the sensors, another ship, far larger than any they had encountered. It was a flagship, the lead ship of the alien fleet. "That's their command ship," Bradford said, eyes wide with disbelief. "The source of their power. If we can take it down, we might be able to cripple their entire fleet." Vance's fingers tightened around the armrests of her chair as she surveyed the tactical readout. The flagship was heavily armored and heavily defended. Taking it down would be no easy task. "Prepare all systems for combat," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We're going to hit them hard and fast. I want every available fighter launched and every weapon primed. We're going to take the fight to them." The tension in the crew's movements was palpable as they prepared for the final push. The Resolute's crew had fought valiantly before, but this time, they were fighting for more than just their lives. They were fighting for the future of humanity. The flagship loomed closer, and the crew braced themselves for what was sure to be a battle like none they had fought before. But Captain Vance knew one thing for certain: the enemy might have superior weapons, they might have the advantage of age and experience, but humanity had something they could never understand, the will to fight, to win, and to protect what was their star. "Let's show them," Vance said softly, her eyes locked on the approaching flagship. "Let's show them why they were wrong to think we were weak." As the first barrage of fire from the flagship's weapons lit up the space around them, the Resolute surged forward. The fight for humanity's survival had reached its heart, the enemy's very core, and there would be no turning back. The Resolute shook violently as the flagship's first barrage of fire smashed against its shields. The vast alien ship, its silhouette looming like an immovable fortress, unleashed a torrent of energy blasts, each one powerful enough to tear apart anything in its path. Yet, the Resolute held steady, its shields flickering but holding under the assault. Captain Sarah Vance stood firm at the helm, her hands steady as she maneuvered the ship with precision. "All systems operational, Captain," Lieutenant Maria Jones called out from the tactical station, her voice calm despite the chaos. "But we won't last long if we keep taking hits like that. We need to find a way to disable their weapons." Vance's mind raced. The flagship was unlike anything they had encountered before. Its size alone was enough to make any fleet quiver in fear. Its advanced energy weapons could pierce their defenses, and its hull was fortified by layers of alien technology far beyond human capabilities. But if they didn't take it down now, humanity would be doomed. "We'll take out their weapons first," Vance said, her voice resolute. "Bradford, any new intel from the structure?" Dr. Elias Bradford's voice crackled over the comms. "The structure's energy network is directly connected to the flagship. If we can disable the power conduits in the structure, it will weaken their flagship's core and disable their weapons. But we'll need to get close enough to launch a precision strike." "Understood," Vance said. "We don't have much time. Set a course for the structure. Engage all fighter craft." The Resolute began its approach, its engines flaring to life as it moved toward the ancient edifice. Fighter craft launched from the bay, darting into the fray like wasps attacking a much larger predator. The alien flagship's weapons fire intensified, but the fighters were nimble, evading most of the incoming blasts while firing back with everything they had. Meanwhile, inside the Resolute, the crew worked in perfect sync. Engineers scrambled to keep the ship's systems functioning, despite the barrage of enemy fire. Bradford and his team worked feverishly in the science labs, analyzing data from the structure's power grid and mapping out potential weak points. "We need a direct hit to the conduit array," Bradford said over the comms, his voice tense. "It's the only way we'll disable their weapons long enough to make a difference." As the Resolute neared the structure, the space around them became filled with the brilliance of the battle. The distant stars were obscured by the violent exchanges of fire, the flashes of energy lighting up the dark void like bursts of cosmic lightning. "Brace for impact!" Jones shouted, her voice strained. The Resolute lurched as another volley of alien fire struck the hull, a deafening sound that reverberated throughout the ship. Vance didn't flinch. She knew this was a turning point, a point where they either survived or failed. "All crew, prepare for the final assault. We're not backing down." The Resolute shot forward, narrowly avoiding another blast, and came to within striking distance of the massive structure. The ship's powerful engines roared as it closed the gap. It was time to act. "Fighters, cover us," Vance commanded. "We're going in." As the Resolute shot toward the structure, the fighters flanked the massive alien flagship, distracting its gunners and providing cover fire. The enemy ships were relentless, but the Federation pilots proved more than capable of holding their own. Lieutenant Chris Adams, in particular, had become a thorn in the enemy's side, weaving in and out of enemy fire, landing precise hits on enemy vessels before retreating to dodge another barrage. Inside the Resolute, the tension was palpable. Bradford's team had pinpointed the energy conduits within the structure, but getting there wasn't going to be easy. The alien warship's defenses were fierce, and it wasn't going to let them reach their target without a fight. "Captain, I've got the coordinates for the conduits," Bradford's voice came over the comms. "The energy surge from the flagship is emanating from a central hub beneath the surface of the structure. We need to land close to it, plant our devices, and get out fast." "Understood," Vance said, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We're going to do this. Now." With a surge of power, the Resolute plunged into the depths of the ancient structure's gravity well. The ship's thrusters screamed in protest as it navigated through jagged spires and massive debris fields, narrowly avoiding deadly obstacles. Below them, the central hub of the alien ship's energy network loomed, its power conduits glowing ominously. "Prepare for landing," Vance barked. "All personnel, secure your stations. We're going in hot." The Resolute touched down on a broad platform inside the structure, a dark, cavernous space that seemed to pulse with the energy of the alien machines. The crew rushed to the exit bay, suited up in their combat gear, and quickly disembarked. Vance led the charge, her boots clanging on the metal surface as she and her team sprinted toward the core of the structure. Alien drones, automated defenses left behind by the ancient civilization, surged from the shadows, their weapons drawn. But the crew was ready. They fought back with precision, their weapons cutting through the drones with deadly accuracy. Vance's crew had faced worse odds before, they had trained for moments like this. Finally, they reached the central hub. Bradford worked quickly, hacking into the alien systems with the device he had modified earlier. The energy conduits began to power down, their glowing light dimming as the alien systems faltered. "Almost there," Bradford shouted as the countdown to detonation began. "We've got 5 minutes before the charges are set." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet as the flagship's weapons fired again. The structure's energy shield flickered, and the Resolute rocked violently from the impact. They were running out of time. "Let's move," Vance commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. With the charges planted, the crew raced back to the Resolute, but not without a fight. More drones poured into the central chamber, and this time, they were accompanied by alien warriors, massive and terrifying. The humans fought back with everything they had, knowing that if they didn't make it back to the ship, their last chance for survival would be gone. As they finally reached the exit, Bradford triggered the detonators. The ground shook as the energy conduits exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves through the structure. The Resolute's engines roared to life, lifting off just as the massive explosion rocked the core of the structure. The flagship's power flickered. The energy shields began to fail. "We've done it!" Bradford shouted, his voice filled with triumph. But Vance knew that the war was far from over. The battle had only begun, and the aliens would not rest until humanity was destroyed. But one thing was certain, humanity had shown its resolve. It had fought back, and it would continue to fight, no matter the cost. As the Resolute pulled away from the now dying structure, Vance looked out into the cold expanse of space. The fight for the galaxy was far from over. But humanity had just taken its first step toward victory. And it would never back down. The Resolute drifted in the aftermath of the explosion, its engines glowing faintly as it steadied itself in the wake of the destruction. The massive alien flagship, its power core crippled, was beginning to lose its hold on the battlefield. Its weapons faltered, firing erratically into the void. The alien ships, once so confident and organized, began to fracture, retreating under the unexpected pressure of the Federation's counterattack. Captain Sarah Vance stood on the bridge, her hands clenched into fists as she surveyed the chaos. The battle was far from won, but for the first time since the aliens had appeared, there was a glimmer of hope. "Damage report," she ordered, her voice calm but firm. "Shields are at 45%, Captain," Lieutenant Maria Jones replied. "The flagship's core explosion took out several of their vessels, but they've regrouped. New enemy reinforcements are arriving from a nearby system, large enough to threaten Federation defenses. Their command ship is heavily damaged, but they've still got the strength to make another push." Vance nodded, her mind racing. "They'll try to regroup. We can't let them. If we give them the time to recover, they'll crush us." Dr. Elias Bradford, who had been working on the science console, turned to face Vance. "Captain, the energy from the explosion, the way it destabilized the flagship, it's not just weakening their ships. The Resolute's sensors are picking up signs of instability in their fleet-wide systems. If we strike now, we could cripple their remaining forces before they can regroup." Vance's gaze hardened. "We're not letting them off the hook. Prepare to launch all fighter craft. We're going after their command fleet." The bridge crew moved swiftly, and the Resolute's engines flared once more, taking them straight into the heart of the enemy formation. The Federation fighters, battle-ready and eager for another strike, took off in waves, weaving through space with precise coordination. It was clear now that humanity wasn't just fighting to survive, it was fighting to protect the future of their species and every world they had built. "We're going to end this," Vance said quietly, as she watched the fighters dive into the battle. "This time, we finish what we started." The Federation fleet surged forward with renewed energy, capitalizing on the opening they had created. The aliens, still reeling from the loss of their flagship and the catastrophic failure of their power systems, attempted to form a defensive line. But they were too late. The Resolute and its fighters were already in motion, targeting the alien fleet's weaknesses with brutal precision. Lieutenant Chris Adams, leading a squadron of Federation fighters, was the first to strike. His ship darted through enemy lines, a blur of movement and fire, targeting the now exposed weak points in the alien warship's hulls. Each strike he made sent another ship into the cold vacuum of space. "Direct hit," Adams called over the comms, his voice filled with adrenaline. "The flagship's not done yet, but we're making a dent." Vance, observing from the bridge, allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The tide was turning. But even as the alien fleet buckled under the pressure, she knew that this was only the beginning. There was still much to do, still far too much at stake. "Captain," Bradford's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We've detected something. Another ship, no, another fleet. It's on its way. It's coming from a previously unknown system. These ships are unlike anything we've seen before. They're not following the same patterns as the previous fleet. I'm certain, it's a reinforcement force." Vance's heart skipped a beat. "How soon before they arrive?" Bradford glanced at his console. "Less than 10 minutes. But this force is significantly larger, and based on their trajectory, they could overwhelm us." "We don't have 10 minutes, Vance said sharply. "Engage all remaining fighters in a final offensive. We need to break the remaining forces now. Focus all fire on the command ship. If we can take that down, it'll be a major blow to their morale. As the Federation fleet pressed forward, the Resolute found itself at the center of the final push. The alien warships were battered, disorganized, and disoriented. Their commanders, scrambling to regain control, attempted to regroup, but it was too late. Vance's forces were already upon them. But in the distance, the dark shadows of the approaching reinforcements loomed. The enemy's new fleet was formidable, a collection of ships far larger and more advanced than the forces they had previously faced. "Captain," Jones said urgently. "We've engaged the remaining command ship. The enemy is pulling back, but they're calling in a second wave. We have one chance to end this." Vance clenched her jaw. "I'm not backing down. We're going to finish them off now, or we won't get another chance." With the Federation fleet closing in on the last of the alien warships, Vance made a split-second decision. "Lieutenant Jones, target their flagship's weak points, every weapon you've got. We'll cripple them now, before reinforcements arrive." Jones didn't hesitate. "Aye, Captain. Targeting now." The Resolute's guns roared to life once more. The air on the bridge was thick with tension as the crew watched the energy reading spike. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the very universe held its breath. The final strike was coming. The first volley from the Resolute's cannons struck the alien flagship with devastating force. The ship trembled, its hull cracking under the intense barrage. Sparks flew, and massive explosions ripped through the vessel. The flagship, once a symbol of the enemy's power, began to disintegrate, its engines flaming as it began to break apart. "Direct hit! The flagship's down!" Jones shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. But even as the command ship crumbled, Vance knew that this victory was far from over. The enemy fleet was still coming, and their reinforcements would soon arrive. "Captain," Bradford's voice came through again. "The reinforcements are still on course, but we've found another anomaly. There's a critical weakness in their formation. If we act fast, we can exploit it and prevent them from overwhelming us." "How fast?" Vance asked, her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the enemy ships were starting to emerge from the depths of space. "Less than 3 minutes," Bradford confirmed. "We can do it. We just need to get in position." The crew didn't hesitate. The battle was reaching its crescendo. The future of humanity depended on one final, desperate assault. "Let's finish it," Vance said, her voice a low growl. "All units, advance. Now." The Federation fleet surged forward, launching one last, coordinated assault on the incoming enemy reinforcements. The final battle had begun, and there would be no turning back. The Resolute shot forward with all its might, the stars around them blurring as they moved towards the enemy reinforcements. The alien fleet, massive and relentless, had arrived from deep within a neighboring system, an imposing wall of firepower that threatened to sweep the Federation aside. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of humanity and the galaxy. There could be no hesitation, no second chances. Captain Sarah Vance stood at the bridge, her eyes locked on the tactical map. The crew was already in motion, each person instinctively working in unison, prepared to give everything they had. Their resolve was as ironclad as the hull of the Resolute. "All systems at maximum," Lieutenant Maria Jones reported. "We've launched the last wave of fighters, and they're already engaging the incoming enemy fleet. Captain, we've got about 10 minutes before they close the distance. If we don't finish them off by then, we're in serious trouble." Vance took a deep breath. The Federation forces were already spread thin, and their remaining resources were stretched to their limits. If this assault failed, it wouldn't just be the Resolute in jeopardy, it would be the entire human race. "Dr. Bradford," Vance called, turning to face the scientist who had become one of her closest advisors. "Do we have any chance of disrupting their fleet's formation?" Bradford stood at his console, his fingers flying across the keys. "Yes, but it will take a coordinated effort, Captain. Their fleet is heavily shielded, and they're relying on a central command ship to maintain control of their forces. If we can sever their command link, they'll be left disorganized and vulnerable." But we need to disable their flagship first, and fast. We're running out of time, Vance replied. All right, let's do it. The Resolute shuddered again as it moved to intercept the incoming fleet. The alien reinforcements were massive, hundreds of ships, with the flagship at their core, its dark silhouette a menacing presence in the distance. It was clear now that the alien forces were going all in, prepared to destroy the Federation at any cost. The question was whether humanity could survive their final push. The battle raged around the Resolute as it led the charge against the alien reinforcements. Federation fighters darted in and out of the fray, engaging the enemy with desperate fury. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as ships were torn apart. The staccato of laser fire and missile explosions filled the void, each strike a deadly reminder of the stakes. On the bridge, Vance's eyes never left the main screen as she watched her crew carry out their orders. Her mind was focused, her every thought locked on the mission. She knew the Federation had to win this. Failure wasn't an option. We've got a clear shot at their flagship, Jones said, her voice urgent. But their shields are holding strong. We need to disable their primary weapons first or we'll never get through. Understood, Vance said. Prepare for all-out assault. Target their weapons systems, every available shot. The Resolute's cannons fired again, sending a volley of destructive energy toward the alien flagship. The alien ship retaliated immediately, sending a barrage of its own weapons toward the Federation ship. The shields flared bright as the Resolute absorbed the hits, but it held firm. Their systems were holding, for now. Captain, Lieutenant Chris Adams' voice crackled through the comms. We're targeting their weapons as instructed, but they're responding with heavier countermeasures. We need a window to get in close. Vance's jaw tightened. We'll create that window. Prepare for a diversion. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Resolute would use its advanced maneuvering capabilities to get in close to the flagship, drawing fire away from the fighters, while the smaller vessels attacked from the flanks, providing the distraction needed to exploit the flagship's weaknesses. The Federation's only hope was to pierce the flagship's shields and knock out its weapons before the reinforcements overwhelmed them. Vance's hands gripped the controls of the ship tightly as she guided the Resolute through the chaos. Brace for impact, she said, her voice firm. The Resolute darted toward the flagship, weaving between enemy fire as the alien ships poured everything they had into the assault. Shields flickered dangerously, and explosions rattled the hull, but Vance pushed forward. All fighters, prepare for the final strike. Jones shouted, her voice barely audible over the noise of the battle. We've got one chance to break their line. The Federation's fighter squadrons swooped in, a swarm of ships launching a coordinated attack on the alien command ship's flank. Missiles exploded against the hull of the flagship, leaving cracks in its once impenetrable armor. The alien vessel staggered under the onslaught, its shields flickering as they absorbed the blow. We've got it! Adams shouted, his voice triumphant. Their shields are down. We've breached the outer hull. The Federation ships regrouped, now focusing all firepower on the flagship's exposed core. The alien forces, realizing their command ship was compromised, desperately tried to protect it, but the damage was already done. Vance took a deep breath as the Resolute aligned itself for the final strike. The last volley of energy fire from the Resolute tore through the flagship's remaining defenses, striking at its central core. The flagship's engines exploded in a burst of blinding light, and with it, the heart of the enemy fleet fell silent. For a moment, everything was still. The alien fleet, now without its command ship, faltered. The remaining warships drifted aimlessly, no longer organized or capable of coordinating their attacks. The Federation forces pressed the advantage, attacking with renewed fury. It wasn't long before the remaining alien ships began to surrender or retreat, their morale shattered. The Resolute pulled back from the wreckage of the flagship, its hull scarred and battered, but intact. The battle was won. For now. Vance let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She allowed herself a moment of quiet victory before turning to her crew. Good work, everyone, she said, her voice strong but weary. "We've done it. We've turned the tide." But even as the crew celebrated, Vance knew that the war was not over. The alien forces were still out there, and this victory was only a small step toward reclaiming the galaxy for humanity. The Resolute had dealt a crippling blow to the enemy, but the fight was far from finished. The crew gathered in the briefing room later that evening, their faces marked with the exhaustion of a long and brutal battle. Vance stood at the front, looking out at the people who had fought by her side. "We've won today," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. "But there's still a long road ahead of us. These aliens won't stop, they'll be back. And when they do, we'll be ready." The room was silent, each member of the crew understanding the gravity of her words. They had fought for humanity's survival, but now they would fight for its future. Vance's voice rang with resolve as she finished, "We will stand strong. Humanity will never back down." And with that, they prepared for what was to come, knowing that the galaxy's fate rested in their hands. The war was not over, but humanity's unyielding resolve had proven that they could face anything. The Resolute drifted through the stars, battered but unbroken. The battle with the alien forces had left its mark, but the Federation's victory had sent a ripple of hope across the galaxy. The once feared alien invaders were reeling from the crushing blow they had suffered, and the remnants of their fleet were scattered across the reaches of space, struggling to regroup. Humanity had shown its resolve, and it had proven that no force in the galaxy could crush the spirit of the human race. Captain Sarah Vance stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at the vast expanse of stars. There was a quiet peace now, a stillness that hadn't been there before. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Humanity had survived, but they still had to contend with the remnants of the alien threat. "Captain, the fleet is reporting minimal casualties," Lieutenant Maria Jones said as she approached. "We've sustained damage, but nothing we can't repair. The enemy forces are retreating, and our ships are already pursuing the remnants of their fleet." Vance nodded. "Good. Let's make sure they don't get away. We've struck a blow, but the war is still out there." Dr. Elias Bradford, who had been working with the scientific team on the ship, turned to Vance with a serious expression. "Captain, I've been analyzing the data from the battle. We've learned a lot about the alien technology, their tactics, and their weaknesses. This will give us an advantage moving forward. But it also tells me that they have more ships in reserve, far more than we thought." Vance's expression hardened. "How much more?" Bradford looked down at his console before answering. "A fleet, an entire armada, is waiting in a distant system. It's still a ways out, but it's large enough to overwhelm us if we don't act quickly." "Then we'll act quickly," Vance replied, her voice unwavering. "We've got the momentum. Let's not waste it." Over the following days, the Federation reorganized its forces. Ships that had sustained damage were repaired or reinforced, and new fighter squadrons were deployed. Humanity's resources, once stretched thin, had found new reserves of strength. The victory against the alien flagship had emboldened every human soldier and officer, from the commanders down to the youngest recruits. They now fought with the knowledge that victory was not only possible, it was within their reach. The Resolute became the symbol of humanity's strength. Word of their victory spread quickly, and soon other planets and fleets were rallying to their cause. The Federation was united once more, and the once fractured resistance against the alien invaders now moved as a single force. The Federation Council convened to plan the next phase of the war, and in each meeting, one word echoed: retaliation. The Federation's forces began their offensive in earnest, striking the alien armada before it could regroup. The attack was swift, focused, and brutal. Vance knew that this was their chance to end the war once and for all. There could be no half measures, no hesitation. The alien threat had to be eliminated completely. The final battle took place in a distant star system, surrounded by the remnants of burned-out worlds. The alien armada, once a powerful force of destruction, had gathered in one last stand. Their ships, scarred by battle, formed a loose defensive formation. It was a desperate move, a last-ditch effort to preserve their dying empire. But humanity was ready. The Federation fleet, led by the Resolute, attacked with a single, overwhelming strike. Fighters swarmed the battlefield, weaving in and out of the enemy lines, while capital ships, including the Resolute, pummeled the alien fleet with relentless firepower. The enemy's defenses were no match for the coordinated assault, and within hours, their ships were crumbling under the weight of humanity's resolve. On the bridge of the Resolute, Vance watched as the battle unfolded on the viewscreen. Her heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, but with a deep, unshakable certainty. This was the moment that would decide the galaxy's future. This was the moment when humanity would prove that it could survive against all odds. "Target their command ship," Vance ordered, her voice steady. "If we take that down, their forces will crumble." Jones, standing by the weapons station, responded instantly. "Aye, Captain." Targeting the enemy flagship. The Federation fleet concentrated their fire on the alien flagship, hammering it with everything they had. Explosions rocked the massive vessel, and within moments, the alien ship's central core exploded in a massive fireball, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. With their command ship destroyed, the alien forces scattered, disoriented and leaderless. The remaining ships tried to retreat, but it was too late. The Federation's forces closed in, picking off straggling ships one by one. The war was finally drawing to a close. In the aftermath, the galaxy was forever changed. The Federation had proven that humanity's resolve was unyielding. The alien threat had been obliterated, and for the first time in decades, peace seemed within reach. But as Vance stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars, she knew that peace would always be fleeting. There would always be new challenges to face, new battles to fight. But humanity had shown that it could withstand anything, no matter how overwhelming the odds. "Captain," Jones said, breaking the silence. "We've won. The enemy is done. The galaxy is ours to rebuild." Vance smiled faintly, her eyes still focused on the stars. "We've won today. But the future is still ahead of us. And humanity will face it, together." As the Resolute sailed through the vast emptiness of space, Vance felt the weight of the galaxy's future on her shoulders. It was a future built on the unyielding strength of the human spirit. A future where humanity would always rise, no matter the odds. And for the first time in a long while, Vance allowed herself to hope. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was not done yet. As the Resolute made its way back toward Federation space, a new era began. The galaxy was no longer a place of fear and subjugation. It was a place where humanity could flourish, where its strength, unity, and resolve would be its greatest weapon. The legacy of this war would echo through the stars for generations to come, a testament to the enduring spirit of humankind. Humanity had stood strong against the forces of the galaxy. And now, they would shape the future. The galaxy was theirs.